Welcome back to Tap Tempo with me, Matt Lang. I'm heading to Austin this weekend for a little Mousetrap label showcase. We'll be at Kingdom, and it is Sunday the 23rd. So if you need something to do on a Sunday night, that's a pretty good way to spend it, I would say, in Texas, in Austin, which is one of my favorite cities. And Kingdom's one of my favorite clubs. So good times for all. This week on the show, I've got Rhys Fulber. He's known as Conjure One. He was Delerium. He's been in bands like Frontline Assembly as a metal producer. He's done everything from Fear Factory to Joey Jordison from Slipknot's band to Paradise Lost to he wrote that song Silence with Sarah McLachlan that every DJ ever remixed. He's been around a long time. He's worked on a lot of very cool projects, and he's got a lot of wisdom at this point, having been around the circuit for so long. So it's awesome to have Rhys on the show. He's a really fascinating guy. And here you go.
I really do enjoy Blade Runner.
Right.
And I'm going to go see it as many times as I can while it's still in the theater.
Fair.
Because it's an immersive experience. And
every Friday.
Yeah, I get Friday nights off, and that's...
yeah.
That's my night.
That's your... Yeah. Off from family, off from work, off from what? Off from life.
Yeah, that's the 1 day a week.
Yeah.
And then the rest of that is, you know, family and synthesizers.
Sounds about right.
And whatever.
What about the Blade Runner score?
The Blade Runner score is fantastic. It's got great sounds. I don't know, I just really liked it. I went in as a blank slate, and I had no judgment, or I hadn't seen the old one in so long, I kind of even forgot it.
Right.
And everything about it I thought was great.
All right.
I honestly do believe a lot of the criticisms are coming from some type of preconceived opinion that people have on the persons involved. And I think if you look at it objectively, it's hard to find many negatives.
Right.
So.
All right. Yeah, I got to give it a look. I haven't been to a flick.
Yeah, you got to check it out, man. You're missing out.
Yeah, I know. I'm away a lot for the next few weekends and all that. So it is what it is.
Bottle service.
Yeah.
Bottle service.
Yeah. I'll just have them deliver me Blade Runner. You know, that'll be on my rider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a tray of shooters.
A tray of shooters?
Yeah.
Like Jello shots?
Whatever they drink at nightclubs.
I don't know.
I never know what to do at nightclubs.
I just stand in the corner in the back.
You know, it's funny. When I was young, I used to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I would go to nightclubs and just kind of stand around. I'd usually just listen to the music. But I started going to nightclubs when I was like too young to be in nightclubs.
Right.
Just because I wanted to hear the music. And I mean, we're talking about the 80s here. And I would somehow get into this club in Vancouver called Heaven. That was a mixed club in the 80s, and I was friends with the DJ, and, I'll be turning this up, and he would play really good music. It was like the first time I heard a lot of, you know, electro and even early hip-hop and even some of, you know, industrial club type stuff. So I would go to clubs mainly just to hear the music. I don't recall even ever dancing at nightclubs.
Right.
I can like maybe count on my hands how many times I've danced at a club. It was more just like checking out the music, and it wasn't even about the reactions of the other people. It was really just like, I like this, and what is this? And then I got to know the DJ, so I could go right up there and say, what was this? And I mean, I was like 17 or something.
Yeah.
I was super young, and I was already like just really interested in that aspect of it.
Right.
Know? And still, even to this day, I'll go to a club if I know someone who's playing or doing something, and I just will be listening to what they're doing, and as much as I can take, and then I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah. I mean, I just stand in it's Princessy. I just stand in like the backstage or VIP area with a beer.
Yeah, I mean,
I just watch, or the mezzanine.
Even in the rave, like when the rave thing started happening, I would go to raves and I would just kind of listen to the music, and that would be it. I didn't do drugs. I just would check out the music and split.
Yeah, basically.
It's
just the Irish goodbye.
Yeah, and it was always that way. And
yeah,
there would be the odd live shows. Like I remember seeing Orbital. There would be some live shows loosely connected to that scene, but
yeah.
In general, I would just go because I like some of the music, and I would have friends there and stuff. But it's always been that. It's like I often wonder if to be a good DJ, you have to dance and have to know that aspect of it.
I think a lot of people are DJs potentially because they can't dance, and this is their way of controlling that environment.
I don't know, maybe. I always thought you had to understand it better. I always thought I had a bit of a disconnect from the actual way to construct a club record because of that, but I mean, who knows? I could be wrong.
I think the more you DJ, the better you get at constructing a club record. I don't think that necessarily has to do with dancing.
Yeah, I always thought like you would be at clubs a lot and loved it so much that you would want to somehow get involved in it. I don't know. I could be wrong. The old Frontline Assembly records, those were club records. It was just a different time. But a lot of that industrial dance stuff, they were club records. That was
right.
That was where they got played.
Right.
The wax track stuff that's undergoing the resurgence now, it's all club music. It's just a different form of it.
Yeah.
And in those days, dance music wasn't as evolved and as nuanced as it is now. But we were essentially making club records, but I don't know, they were just made with a different mentality. Mm-hmm. They were still made as records, more so than as like...
You're talking Frontline?
Yeah, there's no mix-outs and there's none of that stuff, but they were essentially club records.
Right.
It was just a different way of looking at it,
Right, well, you were still making albums too.
Making albums, yeah, but we always, the 12 inches were always important, but they weren't made in a way that club records are made now, where it's a real conscious, structural kind of thing. But back then, we were just still kind of making records, but we just let the arrangements go where they went. We didn't, we weren't trying to hurry anything.
Or confined to the breakdown, or...
Yeah. I don't even remember putting a lot of breakdowns. It was all pretty relentless.
Yeah. I think that's... Breakdowns, I don't think really happened until the trance guys kind of came up.
I don't know. Old Chemical Brothers had breakdowns. Early 90s, I remember hearing... I don't know. Who knows?
I'm just thinking the 3-minute long breakdown.
The long form hands in the air breakdown definitely came a little later. But I seem to remember Chemicals and Orbital having some breakdowns and but the stuff we liked mostly was the really synthy stuff, like LFO and things like that. And all of that was just pretty continuous. I don't recall it being like it is now.
As dynamic.
It's so long ago. It's hard to wrap your head around sometimes.
Yeah.
How different electronic music was back then. It was really something kind of on the outside. And now it's sort of the normal. Now it's like you're doing guitar bands are almost on the outside now.
In a way, they are.
It's gone a completely different direction than I would have anticipated, because now electronic music is so much what you hear everywhere.
Yeah.
Pop records are electronic.
Everything's electronic.
Hip-hop records are electronic. It's literally ubiquitous. And it used to be some weird... when I was a kid in the 80s, anytime I'd hear a really electronic synthy song, my ear would always perk up and I always go, what's that?
Right.
Because sometimes you'd have a random hit song on the record that was just electronic, and it used to always, oh, what's that? Whereas now it's the other way around.
Right, now you hear a guitar and it's holy shit.
Exactly. Now it's oh, what's that? If you hear a pop record with a guitar on it, it's weird.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. Well, the thing is, too, because you work with so many bands that, do you feel isolated from that?
Isolated from?
I guess the exclusion of live music in a way.
I record people playing guitar still frequently.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So you're probably not seeing it as often.
I don't know.
The exclusivity of it.
Having I still have a foot in the metal scene to some extent, and metal is a live world still.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think metal's ever going away.
No.
I think it is what it is.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be people that are into it. And so at least, with metal, you still have a culture that's prides itself on some degree of musical ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bands that make noise are usually, bands with a good drummer or a good guitar player. So that's still there. So that's kind of good.
Yeah.
I think that keeps me connected to a little bit more.
Certainly.
I don't do as many sort of more middle of the road records as I did, like, say, 10 years ago, where there'd be a lot more live instrumentation.
Right.
But metal definitely keeps you in touch with that
Technical prowess and musicianship.
Yeah, and recording something.
Right.
Recording things with microphones is such a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
The art of recording is something I wonder about, because it's just so cool, recording different things. It's just the studio. It's just, things are just so different now because of the way you just don't have the money for the art of recording the way you used to.
Right.
And it seems like I don't even know who does it. It's like, there's like Radiohead, there's bands that still do it, but just in general, I feel like people are missing out on the beauty of the studio, because everything's home studio. Not everything, but most of it. And you're just missing out on that experience of recording things. And
well, even so, you can do that if you build your home studio in that way. You just have to get out of the laptop.
Yeah, but the commercial studio world was just such a cool thing, because it was a whole experience. You go to this place, it's designed for this, that's the one. I do miss that a little bit. I mean, having your own studio is awesome, but I sort of still miss the experience of the commercial studio a little bit, because there was just something cool about going to this facility that's built for this, with people there that are all helping you get where you want to go. It's just a cool thing.
Right.
And I never thought that would go away. It was weird. It's like, I never saw that coming. I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of, there are some records still mixed in big rooms, but you don't hear about as much recording. I mean, I think the top tier you still have is all in place, because I know, like, I'm from Vancouver, and the top rooms there still have international clients in them, like the warehouse. But it's just not what it used to be. The whole mid-range is sort of gone. The mid-range is where I've always operated in, and it was just so much fun to be in the studio.
Well, there aren't as many bands. I think it's as simple as that.
And it's motivating when you're in a place like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're in your home studio or your own place, it's hard to get as motivated sometimes if you're in here every day.
Someone can't show, like, this was Kurt Cobain's guitar.
Yes.
Like, that, you're not going to have that experience at home.
No, it's very, I miss that. That's the one thing I do miss about the old days. That and people actually paying for music, which was... kind of necessary to be able to record in the studio. Yeah, they're all kind of tied together.
Yeah.
But you know what? You can't complain about those things too much, because then you're a dick. Mm-hmm. Because you're lucky enough to make a living off a creative pursuit that is usually someone's hobby.
Yeah.
So if you make a living off of it in whatever capacity, you can't complain too much.
And that's a challenge.
It is lucky. It is lucky, but it's once you have to let go and things move on. But it was just such a great time, and it's hard not to get nostalgic for those days. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's hard. Yeah, it's funny because I came around right at the end of that, so I've only been in situations like that. It was already hell when you arrived. Yeah. So you don't know anything but hell. You missed I mean, I've been in, I've worked in a few of them, and I've been in some, certainly, like when I was in that, actually, the Fear Factory thing with you. Yeah.
That was at NRG. That was a cool I had never seen a drummer play like that before. Holy shit.
That's the world we used to always operate in. We'd be in a commercial studio, we're recording, there's like, you totally took it for granted. You know, I was lucky because I started young and I was already, you know, in the studio making serious records really, really early.
Yeah.
Like 20, I think. And you totally take it for granted. When you start something young, you take it for granted because it's all you know. So it's your whole adult life has been doing that. And so you totally take it for granted. So when it all suddenly goes away, you're like, what the hell happened? I'd never known anything else.
Right. What do I do? Yeah.
And you have to find humility and try and be humble about it. But when you're, it's like, you know, spoiled children. It's like you start taking things away from them and they start freaking out.
Right.
It's like, we're like, what do you mean there's, you know, what do you mean we're not recording here? You know, it's like,
right.
And I remember actually there's a metal band I've worked with called Paradise Lost, and they have an excellent manager. His name's Andy Farrow, and he's really, out of all the managers of bands I've met, I've always thought this guy is a really good manager because he was the one that had the vision, and he was the one that told me you have to get your own studio because that whole way of making records is dying.
Yeah.
There's no money for it. And he was totally right. He was about 3 years ahead of what I ended up doing. And if you actually notice, I know you're a fan of Devin Townsend.
Yeah.
If you notice how Devin's career transformed at a certain period of time, it's because he started working with Andy.
Really?
And Andy took over his career and really, I'm telling you, that guy's a great manager.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because, and I don't know if I should say it, but I'm pretty sure I put them in touch.
That's awesome.
I might have said, hey, you should talk to Andy. He's a great manager.
Yeah.
I could be mistaken, but it's not it's not absurd to think that because we've had that conversation a long time ago. And seriously, Andy took him and built him into what he is. He's just, there's not a lot of guys out there that are like that are really career building visionary managers. And
right.
I can say he's one of the guys I've met over the years that is just really, really good at that and making sure his bands are smart with money and setting themselves up for later in life. And there's just not a lot of people like that out there.
No.
And he comes across as grumpy and salty, but he's got a great heart.
Right.
And he's like, that's important. And he was the one that predicted the downfall of the way I was making records.
Sure.
Because he's like, we can't make records with you anymore because they're too expensive because you're going into studios and we can't do this. I made 3 records with that band and then they couldn't, it wasn't sustainable. So they were making records in Europe with guys who had their own places and it made more sense for them. And he was the one that kind of motivated me. I got to set up my own studio. I got to get my own place. So if I do get these bands, I have somewhere to do it. Then we can have it all make sense. Because if we got to, throw a commercial studio into the budget at like minimum $1,000 a day, minimum,
right?
That crushes most even established bands' budgets nowadays. It just completely crushes it. So you have to be flexible and adapt with where everything went. And
how much live stuff do you do here?
Some years I do lots. Some years it's really, there's no rhyme or reason to how it works.
Do you track drummers in there?
I have tracked drums here. I've actually tracked Gene Hoglan here.
Really?
Gene has played here.
That's cool.
It's funny. Gene was playing here, and I had to drive down the street to Home Depot, the Panorama City Home Depot, which is a little bit like that bar in the first Star Wars movie. And I had to buy bags of sand to put on the mic stands.
Yeah.
Because Gene was just, he's a big guy.
Yeah.
He's pounding the kit, the mics. Yeah, I don't have a floated floor like, NRG or something in here.
Right.
We kind of did this place on the cheap. So the floor is not what a proper studio floor would be. So stuff's bouncing all over the place. So I had to go buy all these sandbags and put them all over all the mic stands so we could record Gene without the mics like
toppling over.
Or like just vibrating away from the kit. So I remember that. That was great. Watching Gene play was a joy.
That's amazing.
He's like the metal Buddy Rich.
Yeah.
And guys like that, they make it look so easy. His cymbal work, just like the little, it's like there's things you don't pay attention to with drummers until you watch a guy like that play, and then you go, oh, that little thing he's doing, and all these little things, especially the way he does cymbals. It's like something you don't think about much until you watch someone who's that good do it.
Yeah.
And it's just, that was a lot of fun. So I have recorded a fair amount of stuff in here. I've recorded strings here. I've recorded, not as much as I think I would like to.
Sure.
But, you don't choose necessarily who you work with.
Right.
And honestly, the way it is nowadays, you can't even be that picky.
No. No, if they're willing to pay you.
If someone has if someone's music is something I can work with, and there's a bit of a budget to cover the overhead here, then we can do it. And so I can't pick and choose necessarily.
Right.
And but I do like recording drums here. What I do is I put a microphone in the little the way the studio is, because you can't see it obviously, is I got a decent sized control room and then a sort of smallish live room with a lot of acoustic treatment, so it doesn't, it's deadened a little bit in the live room. And then there's a little like kitchen area over here, which is another separate small room. So what we usually do is when we record drums, we put a microphone in the kitchen with the door open.
Right.
And so you get a bit more of a room sound in there, because the actual room itself is not that live.
Right.
So I've actually got some pretty half decent drum sounds here with the room mic in the kitchen, the door open.
That's pretty funny.
And it's not a stereo room mic; it's a mono, but it sounds all right. So I have done some decent drum recordings here.
Right.
Usually I have to rent a little more gear, more preamps and stuff, but
sure,
I have done it. And we have tie lines here that go. That's my favorite part about this place, is I have tie lines that go between the rooms.
Yep.
Like a proper studio.
Yeah,
actually, whenever I'm feeling depressed or something, I'll look at the tie lines that go into the other room, and I'll go, look at that. You have a real studio, you idiot.
Like tie lines.
What are you
Xanax.
depressed about?
Yeah.
You have tie lines going to the other room. And look at that. There's HDMI cable that you've never used, but it's there.
That's hysterical.
If you need it, it's there. And a MIDI cable. I think we've used that before.
Right.
And a speaker connection for connecting the cabinet in the other room. So we have the head in here and the cab in the other room, and a tie line for speaker cable. So really, life is always good.
Right. As long as you have your tie lines.
Life is, no, it's kind of true, actually. It's sort of like, because you see, you can look over it right now and go,
I can see it. Yeah,
lines.
Of course, I know. And I'm like secretly thinking like, oh, I'm so envious of that in my house.
It's the coolest thing about this place. I have to thank Rocker Meadows is the guy who actually did most of the work here.
Yeah.
And he was the one that wired that himself and built that. And, yeah, that's funny, because that's like, if I ever get down, I just look at that and it lifts me up.
Yeah. The way I have to do it, like, if I want to record something in a different room than the main studio room, I have to not even that. I just bring the laptop and like a different interface into a different room, and then I'm recording against a bounce of something and headphones. I mean,
it's whatever works.
It's ghetto. It works.
It works. But honestly, like, there's a lot of gear in here. There's tie lines. And, making a living in show business, I'll say generally, is not easy sometimes. And there's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of emotional ups and downs.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you hit those low lows, which are very low, I just sit in here and I look at all this stuff and then I look at the tie lines and think, hey, man.
Could be worse. I could not have tie lines.
It could be worse. This is, I still have a lot of my old gear.
Yeah.
There's a couple things I wish I still had.
Yeah.
I had an Oberheim 4 voice.
Oh.
And check this out. I go to live in Europe in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so I put like some of my stuff in a storage locker in Vancouver. And I don't know what I was thinking. One of those things was an Oberheim 4 voice synthesizer. I go live in Amsterdam for like 3-4 years or whatever. Come back to the storage locker years later. And they go, oh, we had a flood. We had to move your stuff into a different locker. So I go to the new locker, no 4-voice.
Wow.
So someone out there has that 4-voice.
Right.
And it needed work, so...
Well, joke's on them, I guess.
It didn't do a couple of the modes. I could just use the individual SEMs mostly.
Yeah.
But that's a bit of a gear tragedy right there.
Yeah.
That Oberheim 4-voice, gone.
That's sad.
Yeah, that's what happens when you do this gypsy musician lifestyle where you don't really live anywhere in particular, which is kind of what I was doing a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually, when I lived in Europe, I bought a lot of gear. This Dopefer system I bought in Europe.
Right.
The Genelex I bought in Europe. I still have a bunch of gear that I bought when I set up a little mini studio in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, is the Eurorack thing is so big now, and I just remember it was such a marginal select thing.
Right.
Like going to buy the Dopefer system. There was Dopefer and there was Analog Systems. They were I think that's the one I have one module. They were the only two people in the game, and I went to a music store in Germany. They let me bring each system back, and I went to my friend's studio, and Dopefer had more modules, which is the only reason why I went with them.
Sure.
And this, most of the system I still have. I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
And still use it. And for a little while there, Dopefer seemed like it wasn't as good because of all this new stuff. And Dopefer looks very utilitarian and plain, whereas the new stuff's kind of a lot more fun to look
shinier.
at.
It's prettier. Yeah.
And then I went back to the Dopefer modules and go, these actually sound really good.
Yeah.
Which actually what's interesting is when Dopefer modules first came out, a lot of like guys that actually had modular synthesizers, which at one time was a very small group of people, kind of criticized them a little bit, saying they didn't sound like a Roland 700 or 100M or a Moog or an Emu. They didn't have that real... big league quality, that they sounded somehow budget or something.
Right.
And I remember that criticism, but I always still remember going, they sound pretty cool to me, and I have a modular synthesizer, which is something I dreamed of, or something you thought only Hans Zimmer can have.
Right.
And now going back to the Dopefer, they do have a really nice musical sound. I mean, they're not going to... I think the original criticism was like the ladder filter isn't like a Mini Moog or something.
Right.
But then what is?
Yeah, exactly.
But they have a nice musical quality. So going back to them, I really like how they sound. The oscillators don't track as well as some of the newer ones do, but they still have a cool sound. I think Dopefer started making stuff for Kraftwerk, I think. I think that's what
really? Is that how
he made that sequencer for Kraftwerk, the Mac. I used to have a Mac 16 and I had to get rid of it because I don't know why. I hate LED menus, are a bummer. Anytime you need a manual to figure out what you're doing, and the fact the connections were on the back really was annoying.
Right.
Actually, the Dopefer Mac 16 is better with MIDI. If you connect it with MIDI, it's really cool. I used to connect it to the K2000, and it did incredible things. It made the K2000 sound completely different. I'm not sure how, but it pushed it. It gave it like this pushed, tough, almost analog sound. It was incredible. I also used it with the Logic Soft Synths a long time ago, and it was like, wow, this sounds really good. It somehow does something to it that makes it sound more like an analog synth. I think because you get the variation of each step, it somehow makes it sound different or something. So the Mac 16 I actually find is really comes alive when you use it with MIDI more than when you use it with control voltages.
Sure.
It does really cool things. I think they still make them. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
We had one in the old days. It was black. It was like a really early one. I'm trying to remember when that was, like 93, 94.
Yeah.
When I used to play with Frontline in the 90s, and we started doing like, when we got to that kind of professional band level. I mean, not like big, but like enough that we can make a living and we can make real records.
Yeah.
We had so much gear. And so we had like an early model Dopefer We had an OBMX, that Oberheim Don Buchla synth.
Mm-hmm.
We had a Nordlied when it came out. We had a Waldorf Microwave 1 when it came out. We were like, went nuts. Anytime we had, you know, when you're young and don't have any other responsibilities, you can literally spend all your money on gear. And that's kind of what we used to do.
Yeah.
So we had lots of really cool synthesizers back then. I wish I still had the MKS-80 and all that stuff. It's fantastic.
Oh, yeah, I
equipment.
used one of those.
We had one of those.
Yeah.
OBMX, an ARP 2600. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything went through our little room there. We used to know this guy who was into vintage synth dealing before it was kind of a thing.
Right.
And he would just bring all this stuff through our studio. And so I got to play with a lot of different gear back in those days. In the mid-90s, we had like... But, you know, I will say, like, when you amass that much equipment, it's kind of a waste. Because you're working on a record and you have one little bleep off an ARP 2600. It's total waste.
Yeah.
Because... you could do so much with that instrument, and you're using it for like a bleep on one track out of 5 songs. I don't know. It just seemed it seems like you're better off having a smaller, really choice setup than having everything.
Yeah.
Because having everything just seems like I don't know.
It's so much easier to get lost in that too.
You get lost in it, but it also seems like a waste. It's like this is a fantastic instrument. You should use it more because it sounds great.
Right.
But you know. That's the conundrum of gear is you want it, and then it's too much, then it's distracting, then you sell it, then you regret you sold it.
Yeah, it's an addiction.
The only thing I regret selling is the Oberheim expander.
Oh,
but it was a nightmare. I had 2 of them. They were both.
I love those.
They were both unreliable as hell.
Yeah, and
they would end up becoming a time vacuum because they were unreliable. Then you'd end up fiddling with them, and the
filters are so good though.
You know what? I don't know what I was thinking. I'm like, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to get rid of it, and then I fully regretted it.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could probably get another one.
Well, I think they make. I think actually Dope makes an expander filter.
I know, but the thing what makes the expander is the true polyphonic LFOs.
Yeah.
Because most other keyboards, they say they have them, but they're not the same. There's something, because you can make, there's a type of patch you can make on the expander that I don't think I tried to make it on other machines, and it's never the same.
Right.
And it's because of all those, because of the 5 or 6 LFO, is it 6?
I don't know. 5
or 6. It's something unique to that instrument, and the way the filter sounds, and it's a very unique, I haven't been able to I've been able to get close on the Omega 8 and the Waldorf Q, but it's not the same.
Right.
It's but you know, is it going to make your music better? Probably not.
No.
But
can we talk about Fear Factory and like how you guys were using the modular in that capacity?
Well, actually the expander was featured a lot on Demanufacture Fear Factory record. That is the analog synth on that record is the expander. Okay. So any of those big, it's all expander. And Kurzweil, basically, it's all done on those 2 machines. That's all I brought with me to the studio.
Okay.
But then when we did Obsolete, I had bought the Doepfer system and started using that a lot. And I did that other feature where the first sound on the record is the drums going through the Doepfer audio divider and then into a filter and then a phaser. And so on that record is where I started using the Doepfer a lot, and like all the little kind of aggressive sort of synth blippy sounds. That
was all the Doepfer.
All Doepfer. I used to sample it into the Emulator 4 sampler because we didn't have a DAW when we made that record. We were doing it on 2-inch tape.
Right.
So everything was sampled into the emulator, which it's a great sound. I mean,
and then were you just triggering it live?
I used an Atari computer until 1997.
Right.
1998. So the Atari would sequence the emulator. So that was my DAW. It was an Atari running Notator, which turned into Logic. but Logic's not as cool as Notator. Notator was really cool, and the emulator was the audio part of it. And
Got it.
It was sync, and that would sync to a tape machine, which surprisingly worked really well.
Right.
I can sync an Atari to a tape machine without any trouble, but I can't sync Ableton to Pro Tools. So I think it has something to do with word clock. I don't know. But
that's funny.
The synchronizing a 2-inch machine to an Atari was never a problem. It was rock solid. It was funny to think about that. It was always rock solid. And so, yeah, Obsolete, really, I spent a lot of time just making sounds on the Doepfer and putting them into the emulator. And then on that song Shock, we had, I took a bus send from the drums and put it in. And so I think I was discussing that with the other person.
Like Gear Lord guys or...
Yeah, I didn't know who was using Eurorack on metal records.
Yeah.
Definitely in the 90s. I don't know.
I don't know how many are doing it now. That's kind of why I'm curious. I hear there's
a band called Code Orange that have a modular synth on stage. Or more of a hardcore band.
Okay.
But I don't know.
I think Danny Carey's had a modular on stage from time to time.
I didn't know that. I know he's got a lot of gear. I didn't know he brought it on stage.
Yeah, he's brought it along before, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I remember people always used to look at me like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Like when I was sitting in Fear Factory's rehearsal room, people would come by and I'd have the Doepfer set up and they'd be like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
And I'm like, just stay with me here. This is going to be cool.
Yeah.
And no, that was... That, like, looking back now that modular is popular, I can't think of. It's not like I'm trying to say, hey, I did this first. I'm actually more curious. Was anyone else doing it?
Yeah.
It's actually more curiosity. I would like to hear it.
Yeah,
it was more. Well,
that's what I'm wondering too. Is who
is anyone
doing
else
it
doing that? I would like to hear it. It was more curiosity.
You had Nails doing, or 9 Inch Nails doing it in their capacity.
Yeah, he had everything. We used to always hear about. He would get everything first, like the OBMX. Trent Reznor had a prototype or something.
Yeah,
he would get everything. So you would always kind of hear about something, you know, just through the music production scene grapevine. Oh yeah, he had this thing. Oh yeah, really? What's that?
Yeah,
and then eventually you find out it's this Oberheim or whatever. So
right. Well, yeah, it's interesting because there aren't very many people who've bridged those two worlds.
No, and the funny part, it was very organic. It was never anything super calculated. It was just like Fear Factory. Like, we love keyboards, we love techno, we love industrial music, we love anything futuristic. We want to put this on our music, and that was literally it. And it sort of evolved from there, but it was never anything beyond. There was no big plan. It was just, hey, this sounds cool, let's do it.
Right.
And then it sort of took on its own. I think I regret a little bit that we didn't go further. I think Fear Factory held back and kind of played it safe after a certain point because metal bands are always worried about alienating their audience.
Right.
And then suddenly you're not a metal band, and then what are you? And then...
Right.
And I've seen it happen to another band I know called Paradise Lost, who made this one electronic kind of almost synth pop record, and it was commercial suicide, So, I mean, I understand to some extent, but I felt like we could have pushed it all much further.
Yeah.
We had taken that template to a certain point. And I know in England, I think they were, Fear Factory used to do quite well in the UK, and I think they were expecting them to turn into some cross between Slayer and the Prodigy or something, which could have been really cool, but I think everyone held back to some extent, and didn't want to not be perceived as a metal band or I think with metal bands, I think the other thing is the big fear is that they're not heavy.
Yeah.
These guys aren't heavy anymore.
Right.
I think that's another thing. It's like everyone has to be heavy.
Yeah, it has to be aggressive.
Yeah. It's like, what happened? It's like, I'm not sure if that's a product of the 80s and hard rock kind of turning into hair metal pop type stuff. I'm not sure. But it seems very important that everyone's heavy, no matter what.
I mean, it kind of makes sense in a way. I mean, most of these bands, when they hit, they're in their early 20s and they have a lot more anger. And
yeah.
10 years later, they're in their 30s. They're not as angry at the world anymore.
I just think you can do so much if you don't worry about things like that.
Yeah.
But, again, the audience is what holds bands back, too.
Well,
Audiences hold bands back.
They do, but
horribly.
the bands choose to follow the audience, I think.
They all need each other.
Yeah.
They all need each other, and everyone's nervous. I think social media has really affected music in a negative way in the sense that it connects the artist to the audience
So directly. Yeah.
where it becomes a service industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, it really bums me out. I don't think art is a service industry. I think if you want to make good art, you have to listen to whatever the voice is that makes you creative.
Yeah.
I think when you start preparing things, hey, can you guys do this? Or I really liked it when you did this. I don't know. I have an issue with that. I had an experience just recently where some guy got mad at me online. I did a remix of the Delerium Silence record we had back in the day for a video game called Project Cars. They wanted a new version of the song for the trailer of the video game. So I did a new version. They sort of gave me a guideline of what they were looking for.
Yeah.
And then when they were putting the trailer together, they were like, we still need some cinematic touches to this. So we're going to get a guy to put some sort of orchestral elements on the song. And I'm like, okay, fine.
Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. So they put the trailer out and it has some extra orchestral elements, which I actually thought sounded really cool.
Yep.
And some guy sends me a message saying, hey, where is the version with the strings on it? And I said, well, that was added just for the trailer. I'm sorry, that was just added for the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, okay, fair enough. And then he comes back to me a few days later and he's angry,
Yep.
saying, I'm misrepresenting people because the version I'm going to buy is not that version. And he was like really aggressive and he was going, hey, pal. And I'm like, what? I'm like, it's just like, I don't know what to say to that. It's like, because it's not exactly the way you wanted it, now you're angry.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It's like, you do a remix, you're commissioned to do a remix. The company, it's a work for hire. Once the company has it, they kind of do whatever they want with it.
Exactly.
They want to add, trombones on top. They kind of can do that.
Yep.
So I don't know what he was so angry about, but that's something I don't like about social media is like people get really personal and really this isn't exactly how I wanted it.
Well, and also because of the sheer accessibility you become, then they tend to inherit a sense of entitlement over you.
Well, exactly. And I thought I was going to be helpful and reply and say, oh, hey, I'm sorry, they added that for the trailer.
Yeah.
But it's almost like even engaging is a mistake.
Yeah. And it sucks because there's no good way around it.
No, it's a mistake. Yeah, there's
you're
nothing.
Damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Exactly. So I honestly think I think you just can't engage. It's just like, I don't know what you're mad about. It's like, I'm sorry, it's not, the experience you were looking for. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say,
Yeah.
It's, or where people they come at you directly criticizing whatever your new record is or something.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I mean, if you're going to be able to take compliments, you have to be able to take criticism.
Sure.
But the way people do it now is just also personal.
It is, and it's, the strength they find sitting behind their computer when there's no actual accountability to what they say.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is
because people don't talk to you like that in person.
No, people don't talk to you like that in person. But I think people don't realize that, you make something, you put it out there. Not everyone's going to like it.
No.
But, you can't take it like if you liked someone's records before and you don't like their new one, you can't act like it's an insult directed exactly at you.
Right.
Which is what people seem to do a little bit. It's really weird.
Yes, I was thinking exactly about you when I wrote this.
Yeah, it's or like when someone says, "Oh, this band is doing this," you know, like with some of the stuff in Berlin, the techno stuff. Some of it sounds really old school, like really like, you know, 1989, you know, Front 242 kind of type stuff.
Right.
And people are like, "This sounds exactly like this and this," and I'm sort of like, "Well, it's not for you." Because there's new people that don't know that.
Right.
And to them, this stuff rocks a club and they love it. So that's what I was having a conversation with my friend with. I go, well, this isn't for you.
Yeah.
This is for new people.
Right, right.
And, you know, maybe they'll figure out the other stuff. But for now, that stuff's old enough that there's a whole other generation of people. Like that's what freaks me out a little bit, because then you start feeling your age, because there's people that have no idea. Like,
well, they hadn't even been born yet.
They weren't even born yet. It's like when I meet people that, you know, were born in the 90s, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. For me, it's the 2000s.
Yeah.
That trips me out.
Completely.
Yeah.
It's not for you.
Right.
So that's sort of like, it's softened my approach. I used to always be really critical of music I didn't like and stuff, but it's sort of like you just end up being a grumpy jerk. You know, It's just like, it's not for you.
Yeah.
It's not for you. I mean, I mostly listen to older music.
Yeah.
I do believe that it's better to listen to older music. And, I mean, it's good to listen to current music too, and I always do, but I feel if you're really looking for, like, other music to be inspired by, I find it's better to go back.
Right.
Than to completely try and fit in with your peers, you know. I think you're always going to... I think
there's a lot more to learn from it.
Yeah, there's more to learn from it. And it's like reading. It's like you read classics, you know.
Yeah.
If you want to expand your literary horizons, a lot of times you can go backwards and read some classics.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And electronic music is now old enough that it is possible. I mean, I still listen to Kraftwerk all the time. I still love that. Yeah. That was my first experience with that music when I was a single-digit age.
Right, right.
And to me, it's like you can't go wrong. It's like everything is there in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know, so I still listen to that stuff. And I'm getting my son into Kraftwerk, which is something I really enjoy. The fact that he likes that too makes me feel good. Because I actually saw this article the LA Weekly, I think, put up that said Kraftwerk is more influential than the Beatles.
Huh.
And he explained his whole case.
Right,
and you know what? I can back that. I'm a big Beatles fan too, but in a lot of ways, Kraftwerk is ground zero for so much.
That's interesting, yeah. I never thought of that.
And it's, I mean, dance music.
Everything electronic.
Music,
yeah.
I mean.
Everything.
Aesthetic. It's just so much about it. It's in a way, it's a valid argument for modern music.
Yeah.
Maybe in the 90s, not so much, but now it's a strong
certainly
case.
Now it's a lot more relevant.
Mm-hmm.
That's a trip.
Yeah.
I was thinking, because when I was growing up, I think my exposure to it was, because my parents weren't into Kraftwerk, so I didn't hear that. But it was more like Peter Gabriel, Alan Parsons Project.
That's good stuff too, and that's very electronic.
That's how I was introduced to all of it, because I had like this Alan Parsons tape. That was like my favorite thing when I was like 4 years old.
I love "Don't Answer Me."
Yeah,
what a great song!
Yeah.
I love that song.
And then Peter Gabriel, I just adored. Red Rain.
It's all good stuff.
That was so big for me.
Yeah, I mean, my dad's from Dusseldorf.
Yeah.
And we lived, when I was a tiny, when I was little, I don't remember. We lived in Germany.
Yeah.
And Dusseldorf is where a lot of that Neu, Kraftwerk, Kahn was from Cologne, down the river.
Uh-huh.
But there was a lot of that, which eventually turned into what people call krautrock. A lot of that was happening.
Right.
And I know my dad and his brothers were more into blues and rock, but they were aware of the more avant-garde and artsier stuff as well. And so when I was a little kid, we had the Autobahn album, and we had the Ralph and Florian album. We had some other weird psychedelic records from Holland and stuff like that. So, and like I've told people, which sounds like a fake story, my parents took me to see Kraftwerk when I was about 5 years old. I don't know if they didn't have a babysitter or something, because I had young parents.
Right.
But I remember going to the show. It was at a place in Vancouver called the Agrodome. And I remember going to the show. It was one of my first concert memory, and it's Kraftwerk. And they had the neon lights, and Florian was still playing flute.
Yeah.
And I remember the electronic drums they had, their homemade electronic drums. And I remember the neon lights. I remember the flute. I remember they played the Autobahn song, and I remember that the support group was just a regular rock band.
Right.
And I ended up doing some research on this not that long ago, and the support group was this band called the Stampeders, which were just this regular 70s Canadian rock band.
Yeah.
So Kraftwerk is so much in their own planet that who do you put on the support?
Right. Yeah,
just a regular rock band, you know?
Yeah.
But I remember that. And I remember a lot of people were sitting down, and I remember there were a lot of hippies. And that's all I remember.
Yeah.
But still, I think it's safe to say that really shaped the rest of my life.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
that moment on, pretty much.
Simple exposure. That's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, because I had to go and research it, because I had to find out when it was, what year it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, my dad and mom knew a little bit, but I don't think they had the details nailed down either. So
right.
I always ask my dad about concerts he went to, because he went to a lot of cool shows. Like, he saw the Doors with 30 people in 1967.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So he saw Yardbirds, Led Zeppelin. I mean, my dad had great taste in music, which is an asset.
Yeah.
When you grow up with a record collection like that, it's very helpful. I already knew about a lot of stuff. I didn't discover that when I got into industrial, like real industrial music, that was all my own discovery.
Sure.
But up until that moment, most of the stuff had come via stuff my father had, like punk and all the Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, all that stuff. And then I kind of found my own way after that. And
has your son started to deviate, or is he still following what you play him?
My son likes different music than I do. He likes like a mishmash of like pop music, like music that I like. What the? But he likes a lot of like the sort of commercial alternative, like Bastille, like that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, okay.
My son likes stuff he can sing along to.
Right.
So anything with like a sing-along chorus or something, he seems to like. But he does like Kraftwerk, because I took him to the Hollywood Bowl 3D show.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, I really want you to come to the show.
It's kind of full circle.
And I go, it's going to be cool. I saw them when I was a kid. It would be very special if you came with me. It's a 3D show. It's got cool visuals.
Yeah.
My friend, actually a friend of mine from Dusseldorf, this guy named Rudy Esch, who wrote a book about the old Dusseldorf music scene called Electric City, I think. Anyway, he was in town, and he got me some free tickets.
Yep.
So I'm like, I went and saw the residency at the Symphony Hall that they did a year or two before. Yeah, I went to that. I still have the 3D glasses, I think, from that. I went to the Radioactivity and the Autobahn album, where they play the whole album.
Yeah.
And so Rudy got me these tickets, and I took my son, and he liked it. It was
That's awesome.
So we listen to it in the car sometimes. So that I like.
Yeah.
But I think it's a different time now than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you really had to make your own fun.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's so much stuff tailored for children.
Right.
That I actually think it's not good. There's too much entertainment tailored towards children that they can find now. So they don't find their own stuff as much.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything's pushed to them.
Right.
And there's children's movies every month, and it didn't used to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's YouTube and there's video games and there's all these things that are tailored towards kids.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was a kid, you had to make your own fun. It was
Right.
like, so my dad always played music, so I was always hanging around music. So then you start messing around with the equipment. It's just
Right.
I don't have music stuff at home much because I have it all here.
Right.
So I mean, I bring my kid here sometimes and he understands the concept. We record stuff sometimes just to mess around, but I don't think he's dialed it in yet.
Right.
Because there's so many distractions.
Yeah.
There's so many distractions for children.
It's so
now.
accessible.
I think it's negative. I think it's. I think it's
so
negative.
too. Yeah,
I think it's negative.
It doesn't encourage you to really think for yourself and find your own.
It doesn't stimulate creativity.
Yeah.
Because everything's tailored for you.
Right.
Whereas before it was like, I mean, I'm not talking like I grew up in some Depression Dust Bowl era where you'd have a bag of marbles. I'm not that old, right?
I mean, there's nothing. I had a bag of marbles.
but you kind of have to still make your own fun a little bit.
Yeah, no, of course.
And now everything is sort of, everything's tailored for it's not even like that for children. It's like that for everybody.
Yeah. No, it's like culturally, it's systematic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like everything's tailored for whatever you're into.
Yeah.
And it's like there's no discovery anymore.
Well, and I feel like the only way you can is just by disconnecting.
Yes.
I mean, that's the one thing I've found that's made me happier and also healthier is just to remove myself from the noise.
Yeah, I think you need to do something like that.
Yeah.
And traveling is good. Like if you go to different places where things actually are a little different.
Yeah.
That always opens your perspective.
Yeah.
That's another thing about playing music is it's something I like to always throw out there to my other people, friends in the business that they're complaining about a flight. I'm like, you're flying somewhere to play music.
Yeah.
I think we do it with each other too. It's like this flight sucks.
Of course
you are flying somewhere to play music.
I know.
Someone probably even paid for that plane ticket.
No, you probably paid for it.
So, it's like I'm trying to have that perspective now. Mm-hmm. You get a little older.
Well, I notice a mental shift in you.
Yeah, I'm trying to be more like that. I'm trying to be more like the guy in the store. We won't even talk about that other exchange, but
no.
the guy in the store, he says to me, "You having a good day?" And I go, every day's a good day. Every day is a good day. I come to the studio, I work on music either for myself or for somebody else. So every day is a good day, Because when I worked at Starbucks when I was 18, all I wanted to do was make a living off music. Because I used to know guys, like the guys in the band Skinny Puppy, Kevin from Skinny Puppy would come in sometimes. And I used to be like, I want to be like Kevin because he doesn't work.
Right.
He just is the guy in Skinny Puppy. And he lives okay.
Right.
He's not like rich. He's not like a super mega rock star, but he lives off his band.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I want.
Right.
That's all I want. I don't want to be a rock star. I don't want to be famous. I never thought about any of that stuff. I just want to live off making music. That was my only goal when I was 18 years old. I don't like when people are like, I want to be a rock star. I want to be famous. I want to be... that bums me out.
Yeah.
I think, like, why would you want to, what kind of goal is being...
Well, the attention isn't the artwork then. The artwork just becomes a vehicle for something else.
I mean, I just wanted to live off of that. That was my only... So now that I've gotten older and I've gotten over that phase where the music industry changes. Yeah. Now I'm like, you know what? Every day is a good day. Yeah. Every day is a good day. I have nice equipment. I have a studio. Every day is a good day. Yeah. And even when there's struggles involved in living off music, it's not like, unless you hit that elite level, right, where cash just rains down, right, it's still not easy sometimes, but it's still better than
working at
most
Starbucks.
Of the population. Yeah. I mean, it's all perspective, I guess. Some people can be happy with. Sure. I know some guys that just like to read books they have their job, they're cool with that.
Yeah.
You know, but I guess creative people all have a bigger ego and all want this and all want that.
Yeah, I mean,
So I don't know. Maybe it's that. I don't know. But so I've had this perspective lately where it's like it's all good.
yeah, that's
You
good.
know? I got to go to Russia and the Ukraine and Malta and like really interesting places that I probably would never have gone to otherwise.
Yeah,
Because of music.
yeah,
So and I think a lot of people I know don't think that way. People I know that have been doing music a long time, they don't think that way. They're just like, wah.
Well, you have to you have to remove yourself from it just to actually see.
This hotel sucks, man.
Right, and it really takes a different perspective to be able to look from the outside in, because when you're in it, it's all relative. So you don't know.
Yeah,
you're just living in your own reality, and that becomes normal.
I mean, as I've gotten older, I actually am easier.
Yeah.
I don't care where I stay.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I'd be like, ugh, ugh. Now I don't care. Now it's like, that's fine.
As long as the bed is clean and there's food,
there's
I'm
a
happy.
shower.
Yeah.
When I go on the road with Frontline, I mean, I'll shower anywhere. If there's running water, I'll get in there. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, like some of those. I had some pictures of some of these like dungeons, but there's running water, and I just grab a bunch of towels and
you're good.
lay them out on the floor, and we're all good.
Yeah.
And even if there's not hot water.
Oh, that's hard. I can't do that.
You just do it, man. It's exhilarating. It's like camping.
I know, and I hate it.
I remember the first time we went to like Czech Republic. It was still like fresh out of communism.
Yeah.
There was never hot water. The showers were always cold. It was like there was like, well, we don't have any coal today.
Yeah. Right. Oh.
And so it's like, all right, here we go. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
See, like, and it was like prison showers at the end of the hall. It wasn't like each room had their own shower.
Right.
It was like common
just
shower.
They're all lined up.
I kind of miss those days. I know people that live in Eastern Europe would probably say that's a horrible thing to say because now the countries are a little more built up. But I kind of miss going to places that were that different.
Right, of course. Well, just for the perspective also, and almost like the refresh you get from that.
Yeah, when we first went to Czech Republic, it was 2 years out of the fall of communism.
Yeah.
Which isn't enough time. So everything is still basically the same.
Right.
So you have horrible, cold, clammy food, no hot water, just shortages of lots of things. You know?
Yeah.
However, you had 10-cent beer or something like that, outrageously cheap. I remember going to a club in Prague. It was incredible. It was like there was no lights except for like a string of Christmas lights around the bar, and the decor of the club was one of those little Soviet bloc cars, like a Trabant or something, smashed up in the middle of the room, and that was the club.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
And that stuff doesn't happen anymore, and I miss that. That was really cool. And everybody there was into it and having a good time, and it was just cool. It's like everything's globalized, and I miss that weird, like, where the hell are we?
Right.
Like, that's just, but for people that live in those Eastern countries, they're gonna probably be much happier now.
Yeah.
But as a traveler, it was definitely more exciting to experience those types of things.
Right.
And it just gives you so much inspiration and perspective. It's like thinking of those days. I don't know. I just miss that.
Yeah. Well, you lived,
We got to play in Yugoslavia on the first tour with Frontline Assembly.
Yeah.
That was very cool. I remember it was like we're in a communist country. Like that was still when communism was going on.
Right.
And my first thought, unpopular to say this maybe, my first thought was, this is so bad. There's no advertising everywhere.
Yeah.
It's pretty tidy, Okay, there's not a lot of stuff in the stores.
Right. Yeah.
But in general, I remember thinking but I did hear that we were like in the nicest part of Yugoslavia, like Serbia, Belgrade, and those other cities were way harsher. We were in Ljubljana, which was like the jewel of Yugoslavia.
Right.
So I was assessing my judgment on the Warsaw Pact off one of the nicer cities. Right. But it was cool. That was a good time. We had a great show, and it was a really nice club. It was like one of the nicer clubs in Europe that we played on that tour, which is another weird thing, was how nice the club was in this. But there was lots of weird things, how the prices would change every day. We had to have someone there to fill us in. No one spoke English. Right. That's another thing. I miss going places where literally no one speaks English.
Yeah.
Because nowadays, even in Russia, there'll be people that kind of know what's going on. And the internet makes everyone at least have some sort of connection. But in those pre-internet days, you were really somewhere else.
Right.
Like no one spoke English at all.
Right.
And there's something fun about that. There's something fun about just trying to figure out your day.
Right.
You know, hand signal your way through the day. And I mean, I guess China still might be like that. I don't know. Probably not with the internet access.
Probably depends on where you are.
But yeah, that was the best part of all those old days. Was just like we're really somewhere different.
Yeah.
And the fact we're here playing music is just incredible. Like I said, I've come back to that way more now that I'm older, where I just feel way more grateful than when I was younger.
Yeah.
Because you do it when you're young, you lose all perspective. Yeah, and then a bunch of stuff is taken away.
Right. So
and
you're
then
bitter.
all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I got to be grateful because that was cool.
Yep.
And at least we got to do it.
Right.
And we're still doing it. We're still playing and traveling. So it's just not...
life's not that bad.
Life's not that bad. You know, if you can squeeze a living together out of music or making Eurorack modules or whatever you're doing, if you can squeeze a living out of your passion, I mean, what are you going to, how much can you complain?
Yeah.
That you're not rich? I mean, so what? You know, what does that mean anyway? You know, it's philosophically speaking, doesn't necessarily equate anything.
Right.
I heard a good quote about everything here is it's a pursuit of happiness, but not of fulfillment.
Uh-huh.
I thought that was very poignant. Everyone is pursuing happiness over fulfillment, and fulfillment is where you're like grateful and
right.
You know, that's something I'm finally starting to understand, but it takes a long time. It takes a long time. People that make music for a living are not normal people.
No.
And it's sometimes you end up being childlike for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's sort of both the curse and the appeal.
Yep.
And so it takes time to come to that realization of fulfillment, you know, and feeling comfortable about, you know, who you are and what you put out, what music you make. And that sort of means that you can just put something out and just be cool with whatever happens, whatever it is. People put it down. It takes a while to get to that place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a challenge.
I've met some people that got there earlier, but that's usually because they had a lot of success or something.
Right.
And then they get to that place where they figure it out quicker or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think otherwise it takes you a while because you're always... there's always someone doing better than you. There's always... I mean, that's why we didn't appreciate the old days as much, because there was always another band selling more T-shirts and selling more tickets.
Yeah.
So this whole amazing period of time whips by where you're always chasing something and you never take stock and go, wow, this is amazing. And that's why I think that way now, because I look back and I go, I can't even believe that you weren't appreciating that, you know? And it's detrimental in some ways, especially financially, because if you get into that zone where, hey, this is going to keep on going, and you're not like saving for a rainy day, that's the curse of the artist right there.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know?
We like flashy things, though.
Yeah, because you have some success and you get accustomed to all this fucking, I don't want to say nonsense, but, you know, you you end up eating, foie gras or something. I don't know. And you're like,
Right.
I can't eat craft dinner anymore. What do you mean, man?
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating. I think my main thing is with equipment. You get used to nice gear.
Yeah.
And you always have to buy. But you know what? The thing about gear is you can never go wrong buying nice gear.
Right.
Nice gear always holds its value.
Yeah.
So if you make music for a living and you buy nice gear, it's never a bad move.
I just look at all that as investment, basically.
In a way,
and as opposed to like investing in the stock market, I'm basically investing in my own creativity.
Absolutely.
Which, in my mind, pays dividends compared to the traditional financial investment, I suppose.
Well, I've always had accountants that say just buy gear.
That's my rationalization.
If you just buy gear, you get a deduction. You have something that's a reasonable asset, especially if it's good gear. Is always holds a reasonable value.
Yeah, of course.
Like some of these things here, these preamps and stuff, they're always going to be good gear.
Yeah.
Like AMS reverbs are still like almost $3,000.
Yeah.
So you can't go wrong with certain things. I'm not sure about Eurorack. I don't know if Eurorack holds its value.
No, it does.
It does?
Yeah, that's why the secondhand market's huge.
Yeah, I've never taken stock of that.
It's actually I've gotten a lot of things secondhand because, and I've sold a lot of things secondhand. Like modular is the one bit of equipment I do not feel sad about selling.
Well, I have, I know these Peter Grenadier modules here. I don't think these are made anymore. So I got a couple of these things that.
So then their value actually might be higher.
Yeah, he doesn't make those anymore.
Most of the stuff, usually it's 80% of the retail price,
which is pretty
which is
good.
High, yeah.
You know what's funny is the original Dopefer system here. These modules have been in this rack so long I can't get them out.
Yeah, that's funny.
So they're just going to live in that. Right. They're going to live in that case forever because I can't get them out.
Yeah,
it's like think about that. 20 years.
Yeah,
they've been sitting in there for 20 years. That's insane.
Yeah,
that is. You know what? That's a way of assessing your mortality right there. That's 20 years.
No kidding, huh? That's funny.
Yes, that Eurorack system is 20 years old.
Wow.
Oh, my God. I was thinking that the other day. I'm like, really? Already? Holy smokes.
No time like the present.
Yeah. Yeah, I was telling you it's now called the B rig, and I was using it the other day, and it's still great.
It's just called the D rig.
The B rig, yeah, it's.
I know, but it's a Dopefer, so it should be the D rig.
The D rig, it should be the D rig.
Yeah.
I know. I still go back to them, and they are the original.
Yeah.
The original and the best. Not the best. It's just nice.
Yeah,
it's comforting.
Yeah.
And it makes you take stock. I already have cool stuff. Why am I buying all this new stuff?
Right, and there's nostalgia too, because you can look back at that and think about, I did obsolete with this.
And a lot of a lot of stuff with this actually.
Yeah,
like the very first Conjure One record, I used that a lot. I used it on everything.
Right.
Yeah, I've been using modular Eurorack since. On everything for the last 20 years. Like, I can't think of many records I haven't used it on.
Right.
So I've always used it, and it's always delivered, and it always... I was having a big argument with a friend of mine who I'm not going to mention by name, but he does techno. And he has these endless arguments with me about software being as good as hardware. And it just goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I see his point. And to some extent, as far as a record being a good record, it possibly doesn't make a difference the way people think it does.
Sure.
But the way you get there and the whole creative process...
That's exactly it.
It's totally different. And it's more musical because you're recording performances.
Yeah.
And I will say this, I've done programming for a fair amount of records where I'm hired just to do programming. And I know for a 100% fact, when I do it all with analog gear, it gets more of a reaction. Mm-hmm. It gets more of a, wow, that's cool.
Yep.
than if I do it with software.
Yep.
And that's what I said to him. I said, well, your argument's fine, but I know that whenever I do programming for other people and I use all analog gear, it gets a lot more of a reaction.
You're introducing the human element into it.
It has way more of a wow factor when people get the stuff. They're like, wow, this sounds great. Oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
Than if I do it with software. So
absolutely.
To me, that's good enough.
Yep.
To me, that's good enough. I mean, I understand why people make that argument, but
yep.
I find the process is different. I find, and I just know people react differently.
Yeah.
And I've had it with everything. If I do something where I use a lot of analog stuff on it, people always go, hey, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And they'll pick that over something that was more software based. So whatever that means, I still think it sounds different. I know some people will argue this, but I think there's a different sound.
I think it does too.
And I tried to get into some like scientific explanation I was pulling out of my ass, or I had no idea what I was talking about, but I was trying to equate it to something to do with the difference between sine waves and ones and zeros.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
I know what you mean.
Physics tangent here.
Right. But I mean, like, the finite concept of a sine wave when it's just a 1 and a 0 versus the analog representation of a sine wave.
I just think it hits your ear differently.
It does.
And I think that is...
because an analog sine is not a sine.
I just think it hits your ear differently. I think analog sounds hit your ear differently than digital sounds.
They do.
And I think your ear reacts to it I think it's more pleasant. Mm-hmm. The way people react to vinyl.
Yep.
Over a CD. I think there's a quality to it that is perceived by the ear differently. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong, but I think that is part of it. And that is usually my argument in this, is I just feel like your ear processes it differently. And to me, it just feels more like music.
Right.
It feels more like music than software.
I agree.
And yeah, that's an endless argument, but I don't know. I've been doing this a long time, and to me it sounds better. And to me, not only does it sound better, but it's a different experience. And that, in a way, is more important than the sound, is a different experience.
I think, and that makes the sound better, ultimately.
Yes.
You know.
You organize everything differently, or you're organizing micro performances rather than data.
Yep. I agree.
And to me, there's no arguing that.
No.
But some people will still continue to argue. Hey, if software, I don't know. If I could do everything on my laptop, great. But
right.
The experience is just...
No, you need to feel it.
It's just not the same.
Yeah. No, I understand.
It's just not the same.
Yeah.
You know, and like I got to tell you, since I got the Elite case here, Elite modular cases, it's a plug. And you put all the modules into something that resembles more of an instrument.
Right.
You get it. It's a whole different... the modular synth before used to just be like a piece of rack gear, where you approach it more like outboard gear. Now when you have it in a case, it becomes an instrument in itself, and I find that's even better.
Yeah.
Because then you can...
because you're contained. Yeah.
Now it's a compositional tool.
Yeah, it's a closed system, and you just have to go.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what the original concept of like the VCS3 and stuff was.
Right.
Actually, I'm working on something right now where it's based around some stuff I recorded on a Synthy 100 in Vancouver.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
The giant EMS.
Yeah.
I think there's 20 of them. But I have a friend in Vancouver who's a vintage synth restoration guy, and he has a full Synthy 100 in working order.
Nice.
And it's ridiculous. Yeah. It's not an easy piece of gear to work with. It's, really old and cumbersome, and it seems like great. You have all these oscillators, but actually getting them all to be in tune and have the whole thing work musically is a whole other ordeal.
Sure.
But I recorded a bunch of stuff up there, and also with this Buchla 200, and I'm incorporating those all into tracks now. But it's just it does have a sound.
Yeah.
Again, going back to that other debate, there's definitely a sound to that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
To early 70s synthesizers, there's definitely a sound to it.
Yeah.
And really happy that he just lets me go over there and record it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, he's got all, and he's a restoration guy, so he has it all working. So it's not like it actually works. And so I got really lucky on that one. I think Floating Points did a bunch of stuff at his place. You ever heard of Floating Points?
Yeah.
He recorded a bunch of stuff at his place.
Okay.
Because he's got such fantastic old equipment that literally nobody has.
Right.
I mean, he's the type of guy that literally sells equipment to Aphex Twin.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
So he's one of those guys.
Yep.
So he has a Buchla system where there's 3 of them.
Right.
Aphex Twin has one. Some other guy connected to Buchla has one. And then he has one.
Right.
And he lets me come by and record it.
That's awesome.
So I haven't used it on anything yet, but I will.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky with that. And I just met him in Vancouver when I was still up there.
Nice.
And Vancouver's a good city. Vancouver has always been, for studios and recording and music, it's always been a place. They've always made major records there. It's always had that community.
Yeah.
So the one thing about growing up in Vancouver, where it seemed like some logging town backwater in the old days, it always had a world-class studio with international clients. And if you were involved in music heavily enough, you would eventually cross paths with the people that worked at these places. So there was always that community there, which is, I know a lot of people that are audio professionals from Vancouver, and it's got to be all connected.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
And, they made literally household records.
Yep.
They made Bon Jovi and Aerosmith records that were household records in the 80s.
Right.
And those were all made in Vancouver. So there was that community of proper studios and good gear and, a Studer amplifier with the NS10s, which was like a Vancouver thing.
Yeah.
And it sounds amazing. And all these little tricks that you would learn being there. I totally appreciate that now. Yeah. I mean, LA obviously is a big industry city, but it's just, it's much bigger. And Vancouver was this very small little community of guys that really knew what they were doing.
Right.
And so it was cool to be around that and have absorbed, as much of that as possible at an early age and understanding how the studio culture works. Because Vancouver very much was the British culture of, you get a job as, when England it was called a T-boy. In Vancouver you would just sweep floors or be a runner or whatever, and then they let you in the control room, and then you get to touch gear, and then eventually you can become an engineer, and I like that. That's a cool system. Yeah, because you kind of come in at it philosophically more than technically. Yeah, so absolutely. A lot of people go to like engineering schools and stuff, whereas the original way actually wasn't that way at all. It was just be like you learn on the job. It was like apprenticing. Yeah. I think it's more effective. I think it's way more effective because you get the philosophy first, which I think is more important. You understand the culture of how this all works, philosophically speaking, and then you learn the technical parts. So, you're learning. Being an apprentice, I think, is the way to go.
I think so, because I've seen the other side since I went to music school.
Well, you come in with rules.
Well, you come out with rules, but you also, what you come out with this ego thinking you know everything, and it's like, yes, technically you know things, but you're also completely emotionally retarded. Well, like you don't know how to actually work with people.
Well, you can technically know things, but then they're going to go wrong. Right. And then you're not going to know what to do. Yeah. So when you're around a studio, and literally in commercial studios, stuff screws up all the time. Like literally half the time it's like, okay, this isn't working. Yeah. So that's sort of why being the apprentice route is better, because then you learn that part of it, which is real world situations. Yeah. Which isn't like, lab environment.
No, you can't learn that until you live it.
You can't until, and just all the interpersonal, all the drama of recording and all the personal weird, that's something you learn. And like I used to watch Greg, the engineer we used to work with, he used to work with the singers, would be doing records, and he would be always knew what to say to the singer and always would say, hey, have a drink of water now. Here. And I used to always wonder, how does he know that? How does he do that? Yeah. And then one day, you just know how to do it.
Right, right.
It just, over time, you just suddenly now you know. Yeah. And you can only learn that stuff by doing it or being in the room with people doing it.
Yeah. For a long time.
That's why a lot of the guys who mix all the big records are not young guys.
No.
I mean, some of them might be, but in general, they're...
I don't really know any younger. I don't know anyone...
Older guys.
Yeah, I mean, mostly 40s, 50s.
Yeah, because you've been around, and it's something that takes a while to figure out.
Yeah.
It's not a quick thing, you know? And then the funny part is, you all start going deaf when you get older.
That's the irony, yeah.
But, I mean, I know my hearing is not what it used to be, but I can mix better.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. I can do better mixes than when I was, 10 years ago.
Right.
And my hearing is probably not as good as it was 10 years ago. So I don't know if it's because you have a limited scope that you have to really make work. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But
experiential probably more than anything.
I try not to think about it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of just feel as well, just knowing.
Rhys Fulber, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys are in Austin this week or the nearby area, come see me, No Mana, Black Gummy, and Monster Get Down at Kingdom in Austin. Have a good week. Bye.